Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The OUTA Hour, where your voice matters.
Hello and welcome to the OUTA Hour. I'm your host, Tom London, with you for the next 60 minutes, and it's a big show tonight because it's possibly one of the biggest issues we face in South Africa. Our energy crisis, which has been going on for years and years and years and doesn't seem to get any better. What's the solution? Well, nuclear, insists the minister, but we have a team on tonight who would like to dig a little deeper when it comes to our energy crisis. And I'm going to ask the question whether our energy crisis is in any way linked to state capture, and if so, how? To that end, we've got some experts on the show tonight, and let me pop them all up. Well, before we do, shall we, let me tell you, we've got Karyn Maughan, senior legal journalist. You know her name. I don't need to introduce her, but I will. Liz McDade, no stranger to the show, OUTA's parliamentary advisor, and Rudy Heineke, portfolio manager at OUTA, will be joining us this evening. But let's see if we've got the behind the scenes ladies on board. Let's start with the head of marketing and comms at OUTA, Samantha van Nispen, who will also be moderating the YouTube comments tonight. How's it, Sam?
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to seeing your comments. It's a super exciting show. Looking forward to it.
So are we, Samantha. And so when you comment in the YouTube feed tonight in the comment section, know that you're chatting with Samantha. Masego Motsoneng will be handling your comments in the Facebook page, and this show is produced by Devaney Davids. Let's introduce you if you haven't met young Devaney. Hello, Devaney. Boss, as I like to call her.
Hi, Tom. How are you? Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show.
Thank you, Devaney, and thank you for all the hard work you put into the show tonight. That's the show's producer, Devaney Davids, on your screen now. You can say hello to any of the show contributors who are in the comment section down below this video at any time. Just interact with each other as you do every week live on the OUTA Hour. And you can also say hello to Rudy or to Liz or anybody of the OUTA team, any one of the OUTA team who you'll find in the comments section this evening. Well, let's say hello to you, shall we, as it has become customary on the OUTA Hour to say good evening to our viewers from around South Africa and around the world. With the request, please, if you're watching live, please hit the like button and share this post. That's how we get it out to more and more people. Greatly appreciated if you do. And we've got a lot of people who share it every week. So thank you for sharing. Claire Feldman. Hey, Claire Feldman is on board. Claire says, good evening, Team OUTA. Claire is a regular viewer and contributor to the show in the comment section. Nice to see Claire there. Rudy Heineke, who will be in the show tonight and also in the comment section, says, good evening, Outarians. Jeffrey Scott says, good evening, Outarians. Hi, Jeff. Nice to have you with us. Faiza Ravat says, evening, everyone. Hello, Faiza. Andre Jennings. Hello, Andre. Good evening, all, says Andre Jennings. Let's see who else we've got from the Eastern Cape. Michael John Billsbury says hello to everybody. Craig Kent says good evening, all. And we'll put one or two more on. Gail Hutchings, good evening to all in the OUTA team. Laura Base says hi, all. And I'll be popping more of your comments as you say hello to each other and us on the screen as we run through the show. Remember, you can put any questions that you like and pose them to our contributors tonight. Put them in the comment section down below, and I'll try and put as many questions to the team as possible. Well, let me introduce you to the people who will be part of the show this evening. They're on screen now. There's Rudy Heineke. Hello, Rudy Heineke. Good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us this evening. Nice to see you. It's been a while, Rudy.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Good evening to everybody. Yes, it's been a while, and nice to be back, and nice to share the room with so many nice people tonight.
It's lucky to have you on as well, Rudy, and we're just as excited as you are to have Karyn Maughan with us this evening. Hello, Karyn. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my first time. I'm very excited, and I'm very honored to be sharing with the platform with two people that I happen to really admire. Both Rudy and Liz do incredible work, and it's an honor to be sharing this platform with them.
Well, you mentioned Liz McDade, OUTA's parliamentary advisor and no stranger to the OUTA Hour. We call her Mrs. Energy, Liz McDade. Thank you for joining us, Liz. How are things going with you?
Hey, hi everybody. Yeah, it's good. It's going to be a good crackling show, I'm sure, with Rudy and Karyn. We're shall have some fun with everybody. So yeah, glad to be here.
Let's get this show on the road and talk about, I'd like to call her our featured guest tonight, and she is for a very particular reason. Karyn Maughan has just written a book called Nuclear, Inside South Africa's Secret Deal by Karyn Maughan and researcher Kirsten Pearson. We'll be talking about that book and nuclear energy as we make our way through the show. But who is Karyn Maughan? Karyn is, we know the name Karyn Maughan. Let's dig a little deeper, shall we? There's a whole lot to read in her bio, so we're gonna condense it and give you the highlights of Karyn's career. Karyn is a senior legal journalist, documentary producer, best-selling author. She writes for News 24, appears on SABC, Newsroom Africa, and ENCA. She's a BBC contributor, was the associate producer on an Amazon Prime documentary on Oscar Pistorius. The 4-part series, you may remember, called Pistorius, was shortlisted for the prestigious Grierson Award. Karyn also regularly offers analysis on some of South Africa's most high-profile legal stories on radio stations like 702, Kai FM, SAFM, and Power FM, but is most passionate about reporting on social justice issues. Karyn Maughan also appears on international broadcast stations like Al Jazeera and Sky News. She's been named as one of South Africa's most influential journalists, has almost 500,000 followers on Twitter. She has recently completed a book on the aborted Russia-South African nuclear deal. Part of the show tonight will be a discussion around that book called Nuclear. Karyn, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us tonight. We are in good company.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that great introduction. I really appreciate it.
It's only a pleasure. All right. I'd like to kick off, Karyn, if you don't mind. We're going to get into the energy crisis that South Africa faces, but just before we start, I have mentioned your book, Nuclear, Inside South Africa's Secret Deal. Why did you write this book? Why the need to write a book on a deal that was scuppered 5-6 years ago or so?
Well, in many respects, when myself and Kirsten Pearson, who worked on this book with me, were sort of looking at topics around the involvement of National Treasury in pivotal issues in South Africa, we kept coming back to the nuclear deal. And in many respects, it was the greatest attempted act of state capture that South Africa managed to not be a victim to. And that was really because of the actions of committed civil society activists like Liz McDade and Makoma Lakala, the integrity of our court system, which set that deal aside because of the litigation that Liz and Makoma pursued through SAFSA and EarthLife Africa, through the courage of the various finance ministers, including Pravin Gordhan and Nhlanhla Nene. And because of ordinary people who just refused, researchers, Energy Department officials, Treasury officials, who refused to contribute or perpetuate a narrative that the Zuma administration was very intent on, that nuclear was really the solution to our problems, despite the fact that outside of the concerns raised by activists, it was really completely unaffordable for South Africa and would well have resulted in a situation where, in a circumstance where Russia would have been supplying on the vision of Jacob Zuma and Rosatom, and to many respects Vladimir Putin himself, South Africa would have been receiving 23% of our energy from Russia. It would have had profound geopolitical implications for us beyond just the economic ones.
Karyn, I'm going to ask Rudy Heineke to comment on Brian Molefi's appointment at Eskom in 2015. But before we get there, I can't help feeling that timing plays a huge part in this story. And I'll take you back to 2014, where former President Jacob Zuma alleged that he'd been poisoned and was rushed off to Moscow for medical treatment. But it wasn't long after that a nuclear deal was signed. Could you fill us in?
Well, it was literally 13 days after Zuma believed, and he spoke about this publicly subsequently in 2020, after he received what he describes as life-changing, life-saving treatment from Russian doctors, who he says were the only ones that could identify what he'd been poisoned with. He then signs that intergovernmental agreement, which SAFSA and EarthLife Africa challenge in courts successfully. But the terms of that agreement are so far-reaching that, amongst other things, they indemnify Russia against any form of liability in the event of a nuclear accident. So South Africa would have solely had to kind of carry the responsibility of that had it happened. It would offer tax exemptions. it really was an exceptional contract, which the court found went far beyond the parameters of a normal intergovernmental agreement. And of course, what Rudy will be speaking about, which is also pivotal, is that the capture of Eskom, which is detailed in the fourth installment of the Zondo report, coincides, just months before this attempt to utilize Eskom as the vehicle of the nuclear deal at a time where the Energy Department was failing to deliver the goods. And the key proponents of nuclear then become Anar Singh, Machela Koko, and Brian Molefi.
Well, let's talk about Brian Molefi for a moment and move on to Rudy Heineke and ask Rudy about Brian Molefi's appointment. He was moved from Transnet to Eskom in 2015, Rudy. Is that the time that the so-called capturing of Eskom got momentum? Now that we've been talking about timing, there seem to be a lot of pieces of the puzzle that fit in around 2014, 2015, a lot of moves being made. Tell us about some of those.
Yes, Tom, I don't think that, the kick-off of state capture or capturing Eskom, was with the appointment of Brian Molefi. I think it goes back a bit first of all, when former President Zuma appointed Lynn Brown as the Minister of Public Enterprises. And with the inputs from Salim Essa, she appointed a board that were riddled with Gupta allies. And they controlled, the big decisions, and also the appointment, endorsed the appointment or the transfer rather from Transnet to Eskom of Brian Molefi. And from there on, everything went downhill. There were a lot of very strange things happening. The Optimum Mine deal, the other mines of the Guptas, Brakfontein and Koornfontein. Other deals that were made with McKinsey and Trillion. So from there on, it went just downhill for Eskom.
It was at this time, and I'm thinking about Treasury at this point, Rudy, and whether Treasury knew about this deal. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, who, in your opinion, was kept in the dark? And then I'll ask Karyn the same question.
Yeah, I think that the Treasury was kept in the dark, especially with the OCM deal. Treasury was at that stage concentrating a lot on the Brakfontein coal supply and the standard of coal there. And I know that I've spoken to, at the time, Mr. Soli Titangano at the Treasury, later with Eskom and later not with Eskom anymore. But they were concentrating on that coal supply agreement. But with regards to the prepayments of OCM and Tutageta, Treasury was well kept in the dark, and they didn't realize what was going on there.
Would you agree with that, Karyn? Did Treasury and former Finance Minister Nene know what was going on?
I think they were deliberately kept out of the dark, and they were very deliberately kept out of the dark with the nuclear deal as well. It was really only in 2013 where the Energy Department approached Treasury about Russia potentially getting tax exemptions in a nuclear deal. That Fuzile testified at Lukisa Fuzile, the DG of Treasury, testified at the Zondo inquiry. The Treasury became aware that there were going to be potential issues. And even then, Pravin Gordhan, who was the finance minister at the time, told Jacob Zuma that if we don't do things properly, if we don't dot our I's and cross our T's, this nuclear procurement could make the arms deal look like, quote unquote, a Sunday picnic. So there was a very deliberate strategy to exclude Treasury because, of course, Treasury had to apply the constitutional prescripts about procurement being open, transparent, and in the best interests of the South African people. And in many respects, and this continues even to this day, energy procurement under the ANC government has been anything but that. It has really been about furthering the geopolitical ambitions of a particular faction of the ANC and furthering the nests of politically connected individuals who make huge amounts of money off, potentially suspect and irregular energy deals, as the Guptas have been shown to do so successfully.
we've spoken about secrecy and keeping Treasury in the dark, etc. How did the secrecy around this deal, ironically, play a part in raising suspicion and ending it ultimately?
Well, I mean, ultimately, if you are going to do procurement, you have to get oversight from Treasury, particularly when you're talking about a 1 trillion rand deal. There needs to be feasibility studies. There needs to be a sense of what the implications for the South African public would be. There seemed to be a sort of wholehearted refusal to sort of engage meaningfully with that discussion. And it was really through the Earth Life Africa and SAFSA litigation, I think in many respects, that a lot of that, those kind of issues started to emerge. Because remember when they bought that case and they were seeking the Rule 53 record, which really in those kind of legal challenges around the rationality and lawfulness of decisions is very pivotal to understanding what is the decision makers thinking in this, where's the record, where are the documents. They had to fight tooth and nail to actually get hold of those documents. And many of one of the main reasons we were able to write that book was because they didn't let up on it. They forced the Energy Department to provide that documentation. And it really does tell a story of how these massive gaps were just left in terms of issues of cost effectiveness, feasibility, implications, electricity tariffs, all of that. At a time where it really appeared that the Zuma administration elite, particularly in the Energy Department, were trying to push this thing through with really minimal oversight and with absolutely zero to no engagement from the National Treasury.
Liz,
I want to add in there.
I was just about to ask you to add in there. Liz, go ahead.
Well, as Karyn was talking, a memory came back to me, and I remember because of course civil society was tracking what was going on since the 2010-2011 IRP came out, which suddenly had this huge batch of nuclear in, and it reflects on how energy planning, it's just bludgeoning things in with no evidence to support it, and then you just keep running. But just to note that we asked both DMRE or DOE at the time and Treasury for their financials and their feasibility studies. And at the time, DOE said that's Treasury is busy, has completed or is completing the financial studies, all going to be done, but they'll be done, so shortly. And Treasury said, "What are you talking about? We don't have any record of financial. What are you talking about?" And that was very insightful because then you obviously see that one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing.
Liz, for years it would be easy to assume that the nuclear deal with Russia and nuclear deals are off the table, but is that the case? I mean, recently we've heard a lot about nuclear in the news media.
Even as every day, it seems that we really are looking at a repeat. And I guess what we have to look at is, can government, I think Karyn raised it, be trusted at this moment with planning energy for the future? Because until we root out the corrupt officials, until we really ensure that there's proper, transparent decision making, it doesn't matter which minister's sitting there, we are still going to get the wrong policy decisions because there are vested interests pushing this through. And I think, Karyn's book and many other documents have shown that and the Zondo Commission, particularly in detail, how this nuclear deal was absolutely unaffordable and didn't follow due process. So with that absolute fact, then we have to ask, why are we still pushing to even think that large nuclear or any kind of nuclear power plants should be part of our energy mix, particularly when we have a crisis right now, where right now we want to keep the lights on. Nuclear power plants take between, 12 years if you're lucky. That's not going to solve our problem. But like it did in the past, it distracts from actually doing the real work And so what we do is we deepen the energy crisis because we do not focus on the solutions right now that could make a difference. And in the process, we waste money.
Karyn, do you think the intention or the intent has gone? Do you believe there is still an intention to do a major nuclear deal with Russia? And do you believe it ever disappeared?
Well, I think it's telling that, shortly after President Cyril Ramaphosa was elected, Russian President Vladimir Putin had an engagement with him in South Africa and literally asked him, what's going on with the deal? And Ramaphosa's spokesperson at the time said, we told him that we won't do anything, we have to do things at the time, the pace and scale, I think is the language that they use, at a, on a reasonable, level of expense for the South African public, that what South Africa can afford. But nuclear has never been taken wholly off the table. And there's a reason why Rosatom, which is the Russian nuclear agency, has offices in Sandton. They when we interviewed them for the book or asked them questions, they've obviously denied that there was any wrongdoing. They've denied evidence from the DA Shadow Minister of Energy at the time, Gordon McKay, that he was shown by Rosatom officials copies of WhatsApps for the parliamentary group, that there were sort of attempts to intimidate MPs who were involved on the Energy Committee. They've denied all that. They said, they do have hopes and ambitions of a nuclear project with South Africa, but nothing of this nature has occurred. But, the fact of the matter is that this thing was pursued with an almost hell-bent intensity. And when one looks at the 2017 Betrayal of the Promise report, which posits that the ANC received in the region of 100 million rand for a municipal election campaign, which of course has been fiercely disavowed amongst other people by Jacob Zuma, one has to kind of ask, well, when we see what we see with the state capture project, how could it be that, when people were willing to skim off to take huge chunks of kickbacks for the locomotive deal, there was all this manipulation with the Optimum coal mine, Rudy's spoken about this. How could it be that something of this scale, a 1 trillion rand deal, there was no corruption involved? The thing might not have happened, but certainly people, I think it's very, very, probable to believe that money did change hands and that people may want that money back in one way or another.
It would have been South Africa's biggest procurement deal ever. What effect do you think it would have had on the South African economy? What concerns did you have?
Well, I mean, when the minister, Nene, goes to UFA in Russia and he's asked to basically sign this letter, which he believes amounts to a guarantee from Treasury that it will intervene if and when there's a failure by Eskom or government to pay Russia for the build. He then comes back and Treasury does a sort of back of the envelope calculation, which paints a very dire picture of, even in circumstances that were completely favorable to South Africa and South Africa's economy growing, it was not affordable. And the situation, the worst case scenario that Treasury posited for the implications on the South African economy for the deal is now our reality economically. So had we done that deal, where would we be, in a circumstance where we really, really, in an economic sense, are in a dire situation? Also, geopolitically, what would the implications for us have been in circumstances where we were then getting, in the best case scenario, if Russia did build those reactors, which I think there are major question marks over. As we see in Egypt, they do tend to sign these deals and then not build the reactors. If those reactors had been built and we were dependent on them for a quarter of our energy supply, I think there would be a very strong argument that would say that in those circumstances, we would very likely have ended up being a sort of de facto Russian colony. And, that would have also had profound implications for us. So there was no scenario in which such a deal would not have needed to be thoroughly and conclusively interrogated. And it really does not appear that the Zuma administration or those favorable to the deal were prepared to do it. And those people that spoke out and said, this is, we need to sort of have more information, proper process needs to be followed, were then demonized as agents of the West and the puppets of apartheid spies. And all of that leads one to believe that, that refusal to broker any criticism, to answer the crucial questions, was born out of sort of, as I said before, a hell-bent enthusiasm to make this thing happen, regardless of the cost.
When you say make it happen, is that make the deal happen or actually make the nuclear build happen? You've hinted that the Russians may not have had the capability or the capacity to pull this deal off. Would this have been their biggest nuclear build?
Yes, I mean, one of the activists who was really pivotal to supplying the actual Russia-South Africa nuclear agreement to Earthlife and SAFSA, Vladimir Slivjak, has said that, for Russia, it would have been the biggest one that they had concluded. They do sign a lot of intergovernmental agreements with various countries. They have done so with various countries all over Africa, but it hasn't actually translated into a build. And in Egypt, where that deal was signed, I think at the time of the Arab Spring, that construction on those reactors is yet to start. It's now been stalled, apparently, because of the Ukraine crisis. But, in circumstances where Russia is then funding that build, it doesn't necessarily have a direct payoff straight away, that there's this big geopolitical ambition to sort of take on China in terms of its economic hold on the African continent. One has to think, well, this wasn't so much an economic decision as it was potentially a geopolitical one. But that did not mean that those aligned to the Zuma administration, the Guptas who bought Shiva uranium in 2010, who had made a very successful enterprise of getting kickbacks on these major deals, were not going to benefit from it in a corrupt way.
Let me ask Liz about the nuclear deal, and we know it was exposed. We know the public reaction to the nuclear deal. We know it was stopped. Liz, should we assume that they won't happen again?
No. The same people are still there. Even the same politicians have just been shuffled around. And we are certainly seeing signs with the latest mouthpiece being Karyn Maughan that we are pushing again towards an attempt to do the nuke. Whether this is a leftover and under pressure from Russia to get some of their money back, or whether this is a new initiative by new forces, it's unclear. But it's a very much case of a recycled project coming back, because now they're talking about small nuclear, and that was again one of those things that went through in the early 2000s. Again, it was a court case that stopped it, and it wasted a lot of Treasury money until Trevor Manuel put the plug on that one. So, it seems to be a modus operandi. You just create a lot of hype. You get money out of the government to do studies. Lots of nuclear people got little specialist studies. And you like with all state capture, you try and get the influence to lever the most money. Whether it actually gets built or not is sort of irrelevant. But certainly we are seeing that this is starting all over again. And I think as civil society, we have to really be vigilant now. And we have to challenge our politicians, our parliament, which is completely hollowed out, in order to stop this kind of waste of money. And also, what we are doing is driving our economy downwards. We are creating more energy crises by focusing on nuclear build. Now, I've just looked at the budget for the DMRE this year, and a large proportion of that budget is going to nuclear. There's almost no mention of renewables, and there's no mention of planning. And if you remember that even the regulator said We're not going to give the go-ahead for a nuclear build because there's the conditions around the financial viability. Those conditions, in order to meet them, means you have to redo the electricity plan for the country, which would mean reviewing whether we need any nuclear. There's no plan to do that, from what I can gather from what was presented to Parliament, and there is no budget to do that. So this preoccupation with nuclear is not just about a bright and shiny project that somebody wants to cut a ribbon on. This has much deeper consequences and implications for how we as a country survive economically.
Let's go back to 2015, 2016 or so, Rudy. A lot of the names I'm seeing pop up in this story around the nuclear build are names that we've heard come up at the Zondo Commission, people who have been alleged to have been involved in state capture. I'm thinking of Brian Molefi. I'm also thinking of Eskom legal head Machela Koko. How were they and others, and who were the others that you see as instrumental? How were they part of this deal? What part did they play?
Well, Tom, I think, Karyn touched on it. I think we must go back a bit, way back to 2010. And I think I've mentioned it before on this platform that, in my opinion, the big kickoff for state capture was when Jacob Zuma announced in Parliament with the State of the Nation address in February 2010 that government's going to spend 846 billion rand on infrastructure, and the majority of that going to transport and to energy. Mm-hmm. So, Karyn mentioned very, very soon after the Uranium One mine at that time was bought by the Guptas. Stakeholders in that company who bought the mine was Duduzane Zuma, the MK Vets. And that deal went through with a loan from the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa. So, I always said that the state capture project was very, very well planned. And maybe it was after the mine was bought that, the nuclear negotiations, especially with Russia, just got new momentum and started off to escalate. So I will not be surprised if, that specific acquisition of the mine played a huge role in taking the nuclear deal forward. And then, of course, I think, when 2014, 2015, 2016, when these guys that you mentioned, Koko, Singh and Molefi, where they were at the helm of Eskom, it was just an open invitation for the Guptas to carry on with what was happening. At that stage, we knew that the nuclear deal was a bit, it was stopped. So they had to find new ways of getting the money and participate in, energy supply. And you can think for yourself, energy is in any country, needed. And if you are a coal supplier to Eskom in this instance, you are paid in gold because that is what every South African need every day. And for the Guptas to get involved there and the Zuma family to get involved there was just the first prize for them.
Now, Liz, we have this legacy of nuclear energy in South Africa. We talk about Koeberg frequently on the show, and while most South Africans are a little bit reluctant to have more nuclear plants, we do need to plan and fund the storage and the decommissioning of existing nuclear facilities. We need to ensure that we've got a strong independent regulator that can do that. What are the dangers, Liz, with this South Africa's current nuclear regulation?
Well, I think what we've seen is the hollowing out of state institutions that leads to weak regulation. And when you've got weak regulation, you start cutting corners. And then you make out that you're actually doing okay financially, and therefore you suck more resources in. With the regulator, we've just seen the resignation of the current CEO who came on board just around the time of the nuclear deal. We have seen the civil society representative on the board being fired by the minister. So the oversight, now we're wondering, skills level and also oversight. Now, one of the things that has just come through is that globally, this has become a nuclear headache, is that there's some specific tubes in cooling infrastructure in nuclear plants all over the world that have turned out to be, they're cracking. And this is a major fault that needs fixing. So clearly, if you're a good regulator, you must be pushing that your nuclear power plants need to either be in good repair or closed down. And that needs strong regulation, and you need to know that the resources are there to either close them down, commission them, or to fix them. Now, in this country, that's Eskom. And Eskom at the moment can't keep the lights on and has specifically excluded the fixing of these pipes in its plan for its refurbishment at the moment, where it's seeking to extend its life by 20 years. So why is that even being allowed? It raises serious concerns around safety. And as with other Eskom plants, what are we sitting with now? We're sitting with the results of the Molefi era, where he cut maintenance in order to make Eskom look good, and therefore appear that Eskom was doing well, and therefore get paid a bonus, no doubt. But what you're sitting with now is all of that maintenance that didn't happen is now we are facing it, and therefore we are having to pay for the problems that of the previous era. And of course, they didn't invest in any other any other power plants. But this is I think what I'm trying to say, there's lots of dots that get joined up. And if you're going to have, when you look at nuclear reactors, it's not just a nuclear reactor, you've got to look at where you're going to put the waste. And we're not talking about, this is now permanent. So, 250,000 years before it's safe. Where are we going to put it? In whose backyard? Who's going to happy to do that? And how are we going to ensure it's safe if we have a hollowed out regulator that's giving a free pass to things that shouldn't be happening? So for me, I'm seeing that not only do we have to be concerned about no more nuclear, but we also have to be concerned about the legacy that we have now due to bad decisions in the past.
How probable do you think that is? No more nuclear. I mean, we're looking at appointments coming up at the NNR, but we also have a minister who says, "I'll fire you if you don't support nuclear." From my side of the table, it looks like the person who wants to run the place is going to have to be a proponent of nuclear energy. Do you have concerns around that?
I have major concerns. We don't have a chairperson of the energy regulator either at the moment, and that needs replacing. So if all of these people, because the minister wants nuclear, are all going to be nuclear proponents, what does that say for decisions that will be made just generally? Are we going to see that, renewable energy, solar plants and wind plants are now not going to get licenses because you've got a person in the board that doesn't want to promote anything but nuclear? What is going to happen with the current NERSA decision, which said that they're not giving the go-ahead for the nuclear plant because there's some outstanding issues around whether it's financially viable? What's going to happen there if that happens? And so I would be quite concerned that we are in for a stormy ride, but I think civil society will remain vigilant, and we will be sure that if you do the proper homework, the decision will not come out that nuclear is needed. If you cheat, then civil society will have to take you. Hopefully our courts are still going to stand strong. But, you have to resist this, because this is just not about fixing the energy crisis. This is about totally disrupting the country.
If you've got a comment or question you'd like to put to Karyn, Liz, or Rudy, just pop it in the comment section down below this video. We'll get to your questions and comments in just a moment. Karyn, does it surprise you that there's all this, forgive the word, energy around nuclear energy, that there's this push for nuclear, and we're living in a world that's moving more and more towards renewable energy? There doesn't seem to be as much passion from government side around renewable energy. What are your comments on this?
Well, I mean, I think that, one of the most telling things was that we, in 2011, came out and said that we wanted to procure 9.6 gigawatts of nuclear energy, like a few days after the Fukushima disaster occurred. The rest of the world was obviously horrified about what happened in Japan and very circumspect about the potential risks. But South Africa did not appear to have had its enthusiasm dampened. I mean, one of the ironies, of course, is that nuclear energy was one of the pet projects of the apartheid state. The Minister of Energy at the time, I don't think that was his correct title, but the equivalent thereof in the apartheid regime, was basically saying that we should be almost entirely dependent on nuclear energy. We're one of the few countries in the world that, actually dismantled nuclear weapons. So we have a very long, our history with nuclear is steeped in that apartheid past. Koeberg was built by the apartheid government, continues to function in democracy. But as Liz points out, it's at a prolonged stage of its life. And there are real and legitimate questions around the safety issues there. And when Gwede Mantashe is confronted by that in Parliament, he says, Koeberg isn't Chernobyl. Nothing about that, I think, gives anyone great sort of sense of certainty, particularly in a scenario where South Africa's infrastructure is busy falling apart, in sort of areas where the consequences don't necessarily mean, a nuclear disaster, but certainly as part of a pathology that I think we should all find disturbing. Am I surprised that there's still this push? I find it fascinating. I spoke to Andre de Ruyter from Eskom, and he just said, look, we're not necessarily anti-nuclear, but we just simply can't afford it. He's been very, very outspokenly pro-renewables. So has President Cyril Ramaphosa. But there seems to be this wholly, bizarre situation where you have a president coming out advocating for clean energy, the head of Eskom, which is the power utility for the country, saying renewables are our best bet. We have abundant solar energy. This is, given where we are, this is what we need to be focusing on. This is what we need to be doing. And then you have an energy minister who's completely coal obsessed and pro-nuclear. So what does an ordinary South African do in that situation? Who is the adult in the room? Who exactly is on charge? And that's why I agree with Liz. The thing is, what Earthlife and SAFA have done so consistently is every step of the way, writing letters, when, there's a Section 32 determination, and they get lied to. I mean, I think that's what the nuclear deal, showed, was that they would ask the meaningful questions, then get lied to when they did get answers. And in circumstances where they got answers, the responses when people were honest were profoundly disturbing. It cannot be in a so-called functional constitutional democracy that you literally can't trust the state to make decisions which will influence the entire future of this country. But yet we are where we are. And I think that it's really high time that President Cyril Ramaphosa made a clear decision about what exactly South Africa's energy strategy is, instead of it seemingly being beholden to the whims of one Gwede Mantashe, who we know from the State Capture Inquiry report is himself highly implicated in state capture, which of course he is now legally challenging. So, it's all extremely concerning. And I think we as the public need to start demanding that we actually know what is going on, what is the plan here, what does Eskom see as the solution, and who's the adult in the room to make sure that it gets actually implemented in a way that's positive for all of us.
I would add that Chernobyl wasn't Chernobyl until it blew up in response to This Isn't Chernobyl. Let's go to...
Sorry, I just wanted... Can I jump in?
All right, go ahead. We'll get to questions in just a second, but jump in, Liz.
So I just wanted to pick up on that is, yes, it's very easy for people to lie and not give you the truth. And then later on when something goes wrong to then claim that they didn't know or, it really wasn't that it was going to happen. And I think that Chernobyl comment is just a really dumb way of responding when asked a very question about some very clearly difficult times we are in. But I also want to raise one last thing, which is around this energy crisis, is we keep blaming Eskom or demanding that Eskom solve the problem. And we have to swing it back to the energy minister. What is the minister of energy there for? He's there to ensure security of supply. So why is he not pushing for these easy to build IPPs that can connect to Eskom and provide us with electricity? And all the storage stuff, everything that's on the table now is not gas, not nuclear, not coal. It's not fossils and it's not nuclear. Why is the minister going the wrong way? And if he is, why is the president not firing?
And if I can just interject at this point, I know, very, very sort of, and Liz will probably know the same things. There are plans that are on the table. There have been proposals put forward by Eskom. People are coming up with solutions. That's the amazing thing about South Africa is we are solutions-driven people. And we do have solutions that are being put on the table, but they are being ignored. The reasons for that, I think we need to start asking questions about that. It cannot be that, there are these options available, but they're getting thwarted. And I actually, in some respects, believe that this creation of a crisis moment, which I think Liz is right. I think Eskom is trying to do its best in a circumstance where power plants have been run into the ground, maintenance was not done, the rubber is now hitting the road. This is the season of consequence. And they are coming up with solutions and being ignored. But it pursues certain political agendas of people who were highly implicated in the capture to blame Eskom, to blame Durator, to say he must resign, to use politicking and sloganeering and saying, oh, well, if we don't have him as CEO, then it's going to be a solution. That is completely mischievous, completely false, and it completely takes the real responsibility away from the ANC government and the people in power who have been making these poor decisions and have yet to face the consequences for them.
On the way here tonight, I was in the back of the Uber, and as we came around the corner, closing in on the OUTA offices, we had to literally slow down to 4 or 5 kilometers per hour and dodge potholes on the way to work. And I'm listening to what you're saying about South Africans finding their own solutions, and I look at that and I think it won't be long before South Africans just fill the damn potholes themselves. And when
it's already happening.
We've seen incidents of it around the country. We've seen it started. We've seen South Africans starting. We have this history of fixing problems that government can't fix ourselves in South Africa. And I think of my own situation where I live in a house with 22 solar panels on the roof. The batteries, which last throughout a blackout, are charged within an hour or two. The rest of the day, that energy is going to waste. If we had a grid-tied system, we could push that energy back into the system. And it amazes me that in all this time, in all these years, and what we know about solar technology, that we haven't even made that step, that we haven't even said to South Africans, hey, your solar panels on your roof, push the energy back into the grid. You'll help us. It may not solve the energy crisis, but every little drop of water, so to speak, helps in a drought. I just, for the life of me, I don't understand why some of these simple solutions and fast solutions can't be implicated. We're busy talking about nuclear power stations that will be built 10, 20, 30 years from now, when many of our government ministers won't even be alive and will not be held accountable for sure if we leave it like that. Let's get to some of the... Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just to completely... Fast solutions involve citizens. Imagine if you could get a tax break if you put a solar panel on your roof. That's it. This year, if you put solar on your roof, you just get it taken off your tax. Boom. And imagine the factories that would start up and, the other businesses, the jobs are created when you start driving that kind of demand.
I'm just a simple boy from Springs with this entrepreneurial spirit, and I keep thinking, hey, come on, somebody step up to the plate. Unleash the grid tie so that we can grid tie our solar systems, and then come up with a financing solution so that people who want to put panels on their roofs pay around the same they would pay Eskom for electricity every month to have guaranteed power, and then feed the excess back. It makes perfect sense to me. But here we are talking about nuclear power when we thought there wasn't going to be another nuclear build in South Africa. It's crazy. All right, viewers' questions. Abin Saida says, but all this evidence in the public space and with law agencies, why is there this feet dragging attitude. And I guess, Rudy, I'm going to point this question to you. I mean, if there is all this evidence of malfeasance, of participation in state capture around energy in this country, why aren't we seeing anything happen when it comes to court cases and arrests and charges?
Well, Tom, that is a very popular question, and I think, not always so easy to answer. But what is a concern is that, like the viewers said, this evidence, the information, has been in the public sphere for what, 5-6 years already. Zondo began 4 years ago, questioning people, getting clarity and getting more information. We know that the NPA was hollowed out, but the NPA is the only agency in this country that can prosecute. That's their job. That's their mandate in terms of the Constitution. Nobody else can do it. And to use excuses and to hire and fire people and make another promise of another 6 months, we will see some action. We've heard promises before. It's almost like the ETOL promises nowadays. I think that what one should start thinking about is alternative ways of getting people to be held to accountable. And, we were talking about Karyn and Liz was always also, both of them were talking about the energy minister who has been implicated in state capture seriously, in the Bosasa matter. Now, it is not the job of the NPA to remove a minister. If we think about other people implicated in the state capture reports, it's not the job of the NPA to remove a deputy minister like Zizi Kotwa. It is not the duty of the NPA to remove people from in senior positions, in the governing, in the ruling party, like Igaba, like Konyane. It is not the duty of the NPA to take people to the to the professional oversight bodies, like the LPC, like SAICA, IRBA, etc., etc. So there's a lot of other things, other people, other powerful people that must come to the party, and we cannot have a minister of energy, implicated in state capture like he was. And so, yes, I do think that although the pressure is on the NPA and they must really, get their acting in place, there's other ways and means that we can remove people from these positions. Sure. And we cannot stop the pressure on people making the decisions.
Step aside would be a good place to start. We'll be waiting for the step aside policy or rule to actually kick in. Anil has this to say: how does montages' preoccupation stack up? Is this just another protagonist attempting to complete a process which others have started, or is this a different interest being pursued? Karyn?
It's very hard to say, and I suspect that if there is litigation, and there's very likely to be litigation, I think a lot of those issues will come up. But I mean, if you look at the car powership deal, which I think is also massively contentious and potentially going to be a source of a lot of litigation going forward, there seems to be this pathology of making decisions, that are, appear on the face of them to just be manifestly irrational and incredibly expensive. So why is that continuously happening when you know that there are more affordable options on the table, that there is this kind of pro-renewables ethos from Doretta and from Ramaphosa? Why is it that there's this kind of hell-bent enthusiasm for coal / nuclear / gas? And I think that, I agree with Rudy around these people who are not performing and who are clearly acting against the interests of the South African people should not be in their positions. Outside of the Bosasa evidence, which is in itself damning, Gwede Mantashe is not doing a good job. And he's not doing a good job at a time where the South African public that we are all experiencing an energy crisis. But in addition to that, there do need to be prosecutions. And I think the point is that, Rudy said it. He said the NPA is the only one that's constitutionally mandated to prosecute. I think that needs to change. I think when one looks at the Special Investigating Unit, the work that it's done in terms of PPE corruption, clawing back money, the digital vibes fiasco, etc., etc. They should be empowered to prosecute their own cases. SARS, I know for a fact, is sitting on evidence of serious tax evasion against very high-ranking ANC officials, which it cannot do anything with because the NPA is incapacitated. Its people should be empowered to bring prosecutions in certain respects. And I think that increasingly an argument needs to be made in light of the fact that Eskom and Transnet have done profound work on forensically examining the fraud/corruption that occurred there, because those were the two biggest sites of state capture, that the NPA needs to turn around and say, look, we're not capacitated to take these cases on. Let's reach an arrangement where Eskom mounts a private prosecution on its own, appoints advocates to take these cases to court. We will support them because we understand fundamentally that we cannot do it right now. And the South African public deserve accountability. Yeah. This thing of another 6 months is nonsense. We need firm policy. There are solutions out there. And again, as I said, with energy, as Liz was said, we have options here, and we keep being shut down by people whose interests in whose interest it appears to be for us to remain in a state of kind of mediocre paralysis. That's not what this country is about. We are exceptional, we are miraculous, and we can do better than this. And I think it's time as a public we start demanding that we do better than this.
I'll throw in one more question or comment for you, Karyn. It ties into what you've just been saying, and I'd like your comments on this. Paul van der Vyver says, we know there are certain elite individuals hell-bent on destroying Eskom. Do you believe there is any kind of campaign to keep Eskom on its knees, so to speak?
Absolutely. I mean, if you see the kind of rhetoric that comes, for example, from Machela Koko and others, well, we didn't have load shedding while we were in charge of Eskom. Yes, because you ran those plants into the ground. The true mark of leadership is not necessarily, it's you can subvert crises for quite a while by basically just cooking the numbers, running in this particular case, just keeping plants running. We know that there wasn't maintenance done. We know the implications. But the real show of whether your leadership was authentic and positive and had integrity will be the consequences for the people who come after you. And that's the thing. If Jacob Zuma was such a great leader, if Molefi and Machela Koko were so amazing at Eskom, why does it, as soon as they leave there, the place collapses? It's not because they're integral leaders. It's because they basically constructed a situation where they could keep holding the line while they were there. But as soon as they left, the consequences resulted. I think that, there is a very clear concerted campaign to sort of stop, De Ruyter from, doing what he's done, which is to cancel a lot of these patronage contracts, which have, benefited ANC-aligned people for quite some time. He's put a massive target on his back, and he's very outspoken about the fact that state capture is not dead. It is still going on. So I think we as a public also, despite our frustration, which is highly understandable, and I know how it feels to come home to a cold house, we also need to be reasonable about where we apportion that blame and not push for a change of leadership that in the long run is probably going to be profoundly devastating at a time where you do have people who are trying to make a difference at Eskom right now.
It's been a fascinating conversation tonight, and a fascinating read is Karyn's book, Nuclear, Inside South Africa's Secret Deal. Karyn, what will we find cover to cover in this book when we go buy it at our favorite bookstore?
I think it's really just an insight into the greatest attempted act of state capture in our democratic history, and also how it was subverted by people like Liz McDade, Makoma Kala, David Unterholter, who argued their case for them, and Nhlanhla Nene, Pravin Gordhan, Lungisa Fazile, men and women, of massive courage and integrity who said, you will not, steal our country. And we have to understand and respect that that is who South Africa is. It is not the people who are hell-bent on their own enrichment. We're a great nation. We have terrible leadership at the moment, but we in and of ourselves are truly great people. And, I think that book is testament to it.
your work must involve just being exposed to the most negative facts and stories that South Africa has presented in the last 10 or 20 years. So I want to ask you this question. Do you still have hope? I mean, you deal with all these negative stories on a daily basis, and you get to see the dirt and the mud and the rubbish that goes on in this country. Are you hopeful?
I think that we are, as I said before, in a season of reckoning, and that everything is coming home to roost now, and it's very, very difficult. And we are looking at huge levels of immigration. The number of people are just choosing to leave, which I completely understand. But if you do choose to stay, you have options and you can fight. And people like Liz and McCormick show us the lie that we're constantly fed, that we're insignificant and we can do nothing, because we can do many things and we're not powerless. So if we're going to stay, we need to fight for this country because it's worth it.
I have these conversations with Uber drivers and friends and family and colleagues on a daily basis, and I always say the same thing. It seems to me as if South Africans have a very big capacity for pain. We can take a lot of pain, and it takes a lot of pain before we stand up and say enough or not in our name. Perhaps we're not there yet, but hopefully someday soon. I keep thinking of future generations and the poverty stricken in South Africa, and how the actions of today will create a future, the future tomorrow, and not a good one, and not looking like a good one for our children in the future. So it's up to us, I guess, to stand up and say no to rotten deals, to rubbish and nonsensical plans, and start getting back to reality in South Africa. I mean, we don't need pie-in-the-sky solutions. We just need solid, fast plans to solve our problems. And most of all, we need accountability. I've got just enough time to tell you that the competition's still on. If you doodle an election cartoon, I guess I would say, then you could win, I think it's 2,000 Rand cash prize. We're still looking for the winner, and we're looking for entries. You can go along to outa.co.za and find out more about that. I'm sure Samantha and Maseko will pop the link in the comment section down below. You can win $2,000 if you scribble something like you see on screen now on a piece of paper and send it through to OUTA. How good are your art skills? Your cartoon drawings? Get your kids involved. 2,000 Rand, not to be sneezed at. Put about a tank of petrol in your car nowadays. And a big thank you to you. I've been watching the interaction in the comment section tonight, so thank you. Lots of interaction, lots of engagement with the OUTA team members and with each other. It's nice to see the community building in the comment section down below, and nice to see activists, civil activists in South Africa being so active underneath our video. But we do need to thank our guests tonight, and let's start with Liz McDade, Mrs. Energy. Thank you, Liz, for joining us this evening, and good to see you in fine form.
Yeah, and I want to say to everybody, go and find that local councillor or MP. There's one around there somewhere, and sit on their doorstep until they listen to you and take action.
Liz is...
And take your friends.
Yeah, Liz is Liz is OUTA's parliamentary advisor. Rudy Heineke is portfolio manager at OUTA. Thank you, Rudy, for your time this evening.
Thank you, Tom, and I just want to applaud Karyn on her contribution and insightful comments tonight. I think, I'm taking your line out, Tom, but please share tonight's OUTA Hour to everybody that you know, because I think listening to Karyn, a few things just, make more sense after tonight. Thank you, Tom, and thank you. It was nice being here tonight.
And Karyn Maughan, thank you for joining us this evening. You can get Karyn's book, Nuclear, Inside South Africa's Secret Deal at all good bookshops. Karyn, thank you for your time. It was so nice to have you on the OUTA Hour this evening.
It was an honor. Thank you so much.
The honor is ours, Karyn Maughan. And by the way, best lighting in the last few weeks on the OUTA Hour. You got the ring light and everything set up perfectly. So thank you for coming onto our screen looking so radiant and gorgeous. Thank you, Karyn. I had to get a laugh in at the end, or at least a smile. Right, you know that every week my big thank you is to you. We have people joining us from all over the world, expats who are still concerned about the future of South Africa. We've got people who join us from all parts of this country on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. If you're watching the show post live, remember that we're live at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night. You can comment and be part of the show by joining us live at 7 p.m. So to all our live viewers this evening, thank you for playing your part in the OUTA Hour. Don't forget to like and share this video. If you haven't hit the like button, if you haven't hit the share button yet, please do so and get the message out to more and more South Africans so that we can educate ourselves, inform ourselves, and get ourselves ready for the challenges that undoubtedly what I do is just microphone, so we just had a load shedding moment in the studio. We're back on, and you're going to hear me through the device audio now, so I think that's just, and the lights have gone, so it's a good time to say goodbye. We'll catch you again next week at 7 p.m. Stay happy, stay healthy, make a little bit of money, love people, take love from people, and most of all, come back 7 p.m. next Wednesday. I'm Tom London, and I miss you already.
Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The OUTA Hour, where your voice matters.